Hi. So today I actually wanted to talk about something that has really been affecting us lately, and that I'm sure a lot of other people are affected by. And what I'm hoping is that if we talk about it enough and we maybe write enough letters and get the government involved, that we might be able to change something. So the issue that happens with that I'm learning has happened to a lot of people who've adopted internationally is there is a huge disconnect between having the child adopted and being able to bring them home. And so when you so I'm from Canada, okay? So when we contacted Immigration Canada long before the children even came home to find out sort of what the process would be, we have been advised you apply for Part 1 of citizenship before the children come home, which is sort of a background check more on the parents, gives you permission to sort of adopt, that you would actually be eligible to have children under you in Canada, get citizenship. And then we said, okay, so then what happens? They said, well, then once the adoptions are finalized, you submit for the Part 2 of citizenship, which is actually the children's part that would give them citizenship. And in the meantime, you could apply for visitors visas, bring the kids home, you can visit your family, you can bring the kids home, and then you can wait for the citizenship during that visitor's visa. Well, so that's what we're basing the whole process on. And that's what a lot of other people had done from Uganda. But what we're learning now is that what actually happened is a lot of these people had adopted, completed adoptions. They were still staying in Uganda, or at least acting like they were staying in Uganda. So saying they lived here, saying they had businesses here. But then as soon as they got their visitor's visas, then they could go home to Canada and wait for citizenship. Getting a visitor's visa is incredibly hard if you do not have strong ties to the country, or unless you are planning on staying in the country for longer. Now, here's where my problem comes in, because our children are fully adopted. Legally, 100% our children, according to Uganda. Canada doesn't adopt through Uganda, so there's no agencies in Uganda or in Canada that actually deal with Ugandan adoptions. So because we were living, that's not why we moved to Uganda to adopt at all. But when we were living here, we met these kids and started the process. Before we even began thinking about it, we contacted Canada to make sure that it would actually be possible to adopt and have them come home with us. And we got the green light. They said, yeah, it's fine. You just have to complete the adoption fully in Uganda. Once you have the adoption order, then that's when you can apply to bring them back, and we get citizenship underway for them. Now, we've now done that. Our adoption was completed in May. We've been trying to get passports or visitors visas for them since then. Citizenship papers were sent in immediately after the adoption was finalized in May. And our visitors visas were rejected because they said that they don't have proof that our children would leave the country should the visitors visas expire before the citizenship's granted. Now, I understand that because visitors visas are supposed to be for people coming temporarily. They're literally called a temporary visa. So I understand why this is an issue. What I don't understand is why there isn't some sort of visa that is set in place for exactly this reason, that there's a temporary visa that would carry on until citizenship. So if I were to have given birth in Uganda to a biological child, there would have been things I wouldn't have had to wait a year to bring my child home, because there are things in place that you can sort of get like citizenship granted because your parents are Canadian. So it's sort of granted, and then the child can travel on like facilitated visas and all these other things to get the kid home, so that you don't actually have to wait for a year for any processing of any paperwork, which is what happens with adopted kids. Here's my question. What's the difference? So as long as you can prove that your adoption is legal and binding and not child trafficking, that you followed all the laws and all the regulations of the country you've adopted in. Canada has seen that and agreed. What is the difference now between an adopted child and a biological child, and how they should be able to come to Canada? My issue is that there should be something in place, just like for biological children, that as soon as your adoption is finalized in your the country of origin for your children, your country of adoption, there should be some sort of visas in place, America, Canada, across the board, where your child can come home permanently, just as if you gave birth to them, and await the citizenship certificates to be given, so long as you can prove your adoption is legal and binding and ethical. And I don't understand why that isn't a thing yet. So here's what I'm petitioning, that we start as adoptive parents writing letters to our governments, petitioning them to put something in place. I mean, it may not affect us anymore because eventually we'll sort this out, but there should be something in place for adoptive parents, just like biological parents. So we are not stuck for months and months, up to a year or more after adoption is finalized in a country, just waiting to be able to go home. We are citizens of our country. We have minors as our children. They should be allowed to come on because we are citizens, because we are Canadian citizens or American citizens. These are now our legal children. They should be able to travel to our home countries just like a biological child would be able to if I gave birth in another country. And so what I would think is that I don't know the exact details if you have a biological child, how it works, but I do know that there's no long wait period. That sort of, you submit the papers as soon as the child's born. You submit the birth certificates and the proof of citizenship of the parents, and then the child is sort of just like grandfathered into your country. They become a citizen of your country because the parents are citizens of the country. That's my understanding. And it's definitely not hard to travel with them home to visit, or to get them home to be able to go back to Canada or America if you've given birth outside the country. I would love for however that process works for biological children to be applied to adoptive children. So I think that whatever application you have to apply for that, if you're an adoptive parent, you should have to submit all your paperwork proving your finalization of your adoption and the legality of your adoption with that application. And should it all pan out and they see that, yes, in fact, this is a legal adoption, they should then be able to grant the same paperwork and the same travel documents for your adopted children as they would for the biological children. So now, obviously, there's going to be a caveat because we don't want people to be able to just get whatever visa they would apply to this, be able to then take your children to Canada and never pursue citizenship or permanent residency for your adopted children. So obviously, in order to be granted the travel documents to be able to come home with your kids, you should have to prove that you have applied for either permanent residency or citizenship for your children, and it's a matter of waiting for it, or a matter of time rather than a matter of if it would ever be actually approved. So in other words, you have to show that your children are going to become citizens or residents of Canada. You're just now waiting, and you should be able to have that waiting period carried out at home. You shouldn't have to be waiting in the country of origin or the country of birth of your children in order to be able to, in order for that citizenship or residency to come through. You should be able to do that back home. Because here's the reality. We are all functioning members of our countries. Like most of us have educations and jobs and employment, which means we are going to be contributing to the economy of our countries. We're going to be contributing to our countries as parents. Our children are not going to be drains on the society. My husband and I don't have biological children, but even if you do, there are so many children in this world, and we talk about it all the time, how this world is in crisis. There are children being left behind by these crises and being abandoned and orphaned because of the devastating events that are occurring around the world. I am not advocating for going in and sweeping children out if there are ways to keep them in their country, and if there's ways to take care of them in their country. But what I am saying is that when there are people who actually go out and adopt these children and take care of them and love them and give them a safe home, our countries should be giving those children a safe home. So if we are willing to allow people from all over the world to come and immigrate in, and we welcome them as refugees to our country, which I am so proud of, that is something I am very proud of as a Canadian. How is it that when our own citizens go and adopt children and help children so that they can have a family and so that they are not refugees or orphans anymore in their home country, and now we want to bring them, we are taking ownership, we are taking the responsibility to love and protect and care for those children as citizens of Canada. How is it that it is made so hard to do that? If our government is allowed to bring in refugees that they are saying we will take responsibility for, we will love, we will provide for these people until they can get on their feet, how is it that citizens, individual citizens, are not allowed to do the same? So I think our government, and I know our current government, the Trudeau government, wants to be able to help those who are in most need in this world and to provide that safe haven in Canada and to provide that environment. And so I know our government would be on board with finding a way that is more conducive to bringing in these children once they are adopted legally. That there aren't any biological family that think they're just going off to school, that you can prove that your children were abandoned, that they were orphaned, that they truly don't have anyone in their countries to take care of them. That without you, they would have spent their life in an orphanage, or without you, they would have spent their life on the streets, whatever. Once you prove that, and you prove the disparity, you prove that that child needs love, that child is, for all intents and purposes, a refugee. They have nothing in their own country. You are bringing them to your country so that you can provide that refuge to them, and that love and that home and that safety. We are doing it on an individual basis, and our governments should be proud of us for that, and our governments should be supporting us for that. And so what I am petitioning is that the government of Canada, and I'm sure America might be a little trickier right now, but that at least the government of Canada starts to look into amending the current process of bringing home adopted children, so that we are not being stuck for so long in these countries where, when we want to come home, when we are ready to come home to our country to work and to support our country, especially right now in the world that we're in, where Canada needs all the support we can get. We need all the economic backing that we can get. And by keeping us literally trapped in other countries so that we can't do that, we're not building up our country. We're tearing it apart, and we're leaving pieces of it trapped in other nations simply because they want to help other people and bring them home, which is literally what Canada stands for. Right now, my husband and I are awaiting sort of a final decision on our last application for a visitor's visa. If that's denied, we're going to be going to the UK. We're going to be applying for postdoctorates and research positions in the UK. I have my doctorate in medical microbiology and infectious diseases, and he has his master's in pharmacology, which means we can contribute to our country. My husband would love to be able to work with the Canadian military, but he can't do that until our kids are settled back home. I would love to be able to work for Public Health Agency of Canada and use my skills to actually better our country and provide safety and for our country. But if our own country isn't going to work to try to bring us home with our children, then we're going to have to go somewhere else. And we're going to end up in the UK or in Australia or somewhere else, one of the other Commonwealth countries that will welcome us and our skills, and they will welcome our children. And that's where we're going to end up. And we don't want to have to leave our country, but if we have no other choice, we have no other choice. And so what I would love to do is have something set in place that other people don't face the same situation in the future, and that they can go home when they're ready, and they can be back in their country and working in their country and raising their family in Canada, the greatest country in the world. So if you agree, if you are with me on this, if you have gone through this, struggled through this, or you foresee having to struggle through this in the future, let's start writing letters to our MPs. Write letters to the Prime Minister, to the Minister of Immigration. And let's start working constructively and not tearing anyone down. I understand this has been a long system to try to, and that adoptions are booming. And so this is something that has to change and has to adapt, just like anything else. That this is now something that we need. So let's start working on it. Let's start building a program. Let's start building a system so that when people are going through this, that there's steps that are taken, that it's well known that these children can come home and their parents can come home, and we can all be back in Canada working and loving our incredible country. Anyway, comment if you agree with this, if you struggle with similar situations, if you have any ideas as to how we can move forward to really start pushing this in motion. I'm going to sort of write out an outline, and maybe I'll share it in the comments. I'll share an attachment sort of like as what I think might work as I do a little more research into how it currently works for biological children. And anyone who has biological children, when you've given birth outside of the country, if you're watching this, if you can maybe make some comments as to how you actually, the process that you went through to get your children home, that might help us be able to have some ideas as to how we can amend the procedure for adoptive parents as well. And so any concerns you have, any questions, anything that you think might build on this, let's work together. Let's build this up. Let's get our governments working so that we can continue to expand our families and just thrive in Canada together. Anyway, thank you for listening, and hopefully we can build this together. Talk to you next time.